and this has got to do with the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, who has now been accused of a conflict of interest after overriding officials to give £250,000, that's roughly about less than $300,000, to a Gaza aid agency, while members of his family were trapped in the war zone at a time when Israel had begun its offensive there. Yousaf had stepped in after officials had recommended around $128,000 to $250,000 in donation to UNICEF. He had overruled their advice and had declared that $300,000 of taxpayers' money should instead be given to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA. The agency, remember, has faced a lot of allegations from Israel that some members of UNRWA, that's about 12 or 13 members of UNRWA, out of a staff of about 13,000, may have been involved in the 7th of October attacks. And this resulted in many countries, Western nations, pulling their funds off the UNRWA agency, although Canada has now again said that it will start giving funds to UNRWA. The Scottish government has given around $900,000 to UNRWA since the 7th of October attack. The Scottish government's donation was publicly announced on the 2nd of November, the same day that Yousaf met a delegation of senior UNRWA officials. The following day, that is the 3rd of November, his mother-in-law and father-in-law were given safe passage out of the Gaza Strip via the Rafah border crossing into Egypt. Humza Yousaf, however, has denied that the donation was in any way connected to the release of his family members. However, the First Minister is now facing accusations that his interference in the allocation of the aid process had amounted to a conflict of interest, and questions of whether his actions had breached the ministerial code are being raised. A senior member of the Scottish Parliament has said that if Humza Yousaf was unable to give satisfactory explanation for his actions, then he should face an inquiry. Now, according to reports, a complaint has now been made to the Metropolitan Police's anti-terror hotline, and a submission is being prepared to send to Audit Scotland, which is the independent body that oversees as to how public money is spent in Scotland. Now, to give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by Mr. Glenn Deason, who's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He's joining us live from Oslo. Now, Mr. Deason, this is a controversy that the Scottish First Minister seems to have gotten embroiled in. What do you make of this?
Well, I think the main concern here is that the whole issue or the whole topic is very polarizing, much as this war which is going on. And the political motivations behind how issues are framed, obviously, it depends on which side is doing it. So the argument now seems to be on one side. Some are saying that the British press is very aggressive, propagandistic and biased in favor of Israel. On the other side, they're saying that this is well, obviously this doesn't look good. There's need for more scrutiny, and I think this is also reasonable. It's warranted because the weakness of this Humza Yousaf is, of course, that on the 2nd of November, when the donation was announced, and he met with these officials from UNRWA. When we saw this next day on November 3rd, in which his mother and father-in-law got safe crossing. So obviously, if these two incidents are related, this is quite problematic, and this is why they're saying it's a conflict of interest. He shouldn't have been involved if there's an issue like this that involves his own family. So I think the main approach they have to take is to have some transparency around this, because this is one of the issues which can completely explode, as one side now is saying that this is a far-right conspiracy theory. The other side is saying that he abused his power. So no matter which side that wins now, this would divide society. So it has to be solved, I think, through proper transparency and look into this. As Humza Yousaf says, he argues that that their ability to leave had nothing to do with the donation which he gave. So he said this was because of the work at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. So I think this is where the investigation and transparency have to release some of this polarization.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about polarization, but how much do you think this issue of Humza Yousaf having overridden the officials in giving aid where the officials had recommended anywhere from 125,000 to 250,000 pounds, but he had gone on to give about 300,000 pounds. How much do you think this is likely to impact politics in Scotland?
Oh, very much so, and there's a reason. It obviously doesn't look good if he overrides his own officials. Not only gives much more, but also has it diverted to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, as opposed to UNICEF, which they had advised. But again, this is why I'm also saying that one of the reasons it's going to have a backlash is because everything now has become very polarized. Because, as you mentioned, UNRWA is very much become smeared as well by Israel. So obviously the argument is that the workers have been accused by Israel to have participated on 7th of October. Now, if this is correct, of course, it's problematic. But again, one can't really take Israel's word for it, as it's carrying out ethnic cleansing and blocking aid. So it's intelligent agencies shouldn't be trusted on face value, as they obviously have political motivation. Absolutely. So also we see anything related to Palestine is linked to Hamas and terrorism. Now, I'm not saying that these aid workers were not involved on the 7th of October. This is my point. I think it has to be resolved through proper transparency and investigation in order to diffuse some of this tension.
Absolutely. I think you've touched the nub of this issue there. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Glenn Deason, for joining us and getting us that perspective. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.